Welcome to the Forge Truth Podcast, where we are building great men as God defines greatness. Forge is a movement of men with a mission to help all men realize they're the deeply beloved, redeemed sons of the Most High God. I'm your producer, Zach, and I'm here to discuss the issues that affect men the most with our two hosts, Dr. Pete Allenson, lifelong pastor and leader of Forge, and Jason Quinones, Bishop of Core Faith Church in Oviedo, Florida. Men, welcome to the show.
Yeah, good to be here. Bishop is here.
Yep.
You look like you're ready to go. I mean, you going to pump iron today?
I am. Yes, sir.
All right. All right. What are you benching these days?
It depends on the day.
Okay. on a good day, what are you benching?
I don't know. I mean, I like dumbbells, so I would say, getting up to the 95s is good.
Wow. Good. That's just slightly over my max, so I just want you to
I'm designing a bingo card for the Forge Truth Podcast, and definitely on it is going to be a space for Pete asking Jason how much he benches.
I know, because I never remember,
Yeah.
But 95s, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a great show for you today with a guest in the Forge studio.
I know he's here already.
Absolutely. So, Pete, why don't you introduce our guest?
All right, Dave Wiley is with us. Dave is a longtime attender at Forge on Tuesday mornings, and Dave has a great story to tell about freedom and about what God has been doing in his life. And so, Dave, let's jump into it. Tell us, you grew up in a Christian home. Tell us a little bit about that and what's been going on.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Appreciate being here. Yeah, you're right. Pastor Pete, I grew up in a Christian home. My whole life. I'm the youngest of three from my mom, and she was remarried when I was about 6, and so we went to church. I gave my life to Christ when I was about 7 years old. I remember it today. I got water baptized. Went to a non-denominational spirit-filled church, and in middle school, my parents, as I walked out the door, I was the only child living there at the time. My stepbrother moved down later, but they would literally put on the armor of God as I walked out the door.
Huh. And quote that verse.
It was on the door when you came in, and I'd go off to school, and I was a very attended a lot and helped out in the youth ministry when I was younger. That kind of faded off a little bit in the high school years. The enemy, looking back, right? Hindsight's always interesting. You can look back and it's so clear and so simple, but when you're in the middle of it, man, you don't see it.
Yeah.
So kind of wandered off a little bit that way. When it came time for college, my parents had 2 rules for them. Fortunately, they were able to pay my way through college, but it had to be outside of the state of Florida, and it had to be a Christian college.
Huh.
So
they wanted you outside the state.
Would
you take that personally?
Yeah. Didn't want me home on the weekends. So and now I've got kids of my own, and so there's benefit and there's good and bad to that. So I went to Lee University up in Cleveland, Tennessee, and what a great experience that was. Lee is just had such a good time up there. But one thing I noticed, being at Lee, we had chapel 3 days a week. Every student, I was a business major, business administration, and every student graduates with a theology minor because you took a Bible class every single semester. Mm-hmm. And and then of course we attended a Sunday morning service of a church locally of our own, and so I was so just surrounded by God and learning about the Bible and all of those things that my personal relationship, looking back, really just wasn't there. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'll come back to this in a little bit, but my sophomore year, there was actually a pretty defining moment actually in college that kind of set the last, this is about 2 decades, so it kind of set my path a little bit differently, but that I'll get back to. But, I was a very good deeds-based Christian. I'm a good rule follower. So the Bible says, this. I'm not saying, of course I sin and things like that, right? But, for the, big ticket items, I'm really good at following rules. And I thought that, knowing, I've heard my whole life, right? It's not about it's about grace. It's not about deeds and things we do. It's about, what we do with God's grace and what he's done for us. But for years and years, that wasn't really the case for me. Graduated, got married. We moved out to Texas. I've always helped out in the church. Go to church on Sundays. Really kind of that perfect Facebook Christian. Mm-hmm. If you look at it that way.
Everybody would have looked at you, Bishop. There would have been the right people that you'd wanted Dave in your church,
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Not me, but you would have wanted Dave.
Yeah. I mean, to tithe regularly, that faded off over the years a little bit, but. And as time passed, it went through some really hard times. Personally, in the late 2000s, I owned a real estate company. Had a bankruptcy, so that was a defining pretty big moment for especially me as the head of the household and the financial provider for my family. And you go through something like that.
Rough.
It is. Rebounded well, redid my career a little bit and reshifted it, focused it, and had some great successes. But about 12, 13 years after I graduated college and we went through this, and now I'm finding some other success. Started, my drinking, over the time, I kind of was raised in a household that, my dad started from nothing, his business, and grew and grew and grew. And as I saw him grow in things, then I saw that, hey, like as you become successful, alcohol kind of came in. That's what I saw, right? We're growing up. And so I kind of followed that. So as I had success, that would come and go. So in the late 2000s, real estate was really good before obviously the crash. And so I had a little bit of that, but it didn't get out of control. Started getting really bad, about 10 years ago. And it's, it's been a rough patch, until, especially as you avoid and deny, that you have an issue. And for those years, my little girls and my wife, I was the family secret. Nobody, I drank in secret. Nobody would have ever known I was an alcoholic. But I had, bottles buried and hidden all over the place, and, drank, alone typically, or tried to. I mean, it was rough. But I was stuck in this, a prison. My own prison, that. The guilt and the shame just was so massive that it was extremely difficult to see any sort of light at the end of the tunnel. And so it was a really tough time.
So let me ask you, what was the extent of your alcohol? I mean, you were an alcoholic. You said you were an alcoholic, but how much would you really drink? Like at the end of a day, would you drink every day? Would it be periodic? And how long would you drink when you started drinking?
Yeah, it was pretty much every day.
Okay.
It was, after work, a lot of times we'd go out and maybe have a beer or something. But then when I'd get home, kind of just shut myself off to the room. And this is in the later years of this, like at my peak.
Right.
I would probably drink half a liter to a liter of vodka a day.
Wow. A day?
At night.
Okay.
Basically until I fell asleep.
Okay. Wow. So that impacted family time.
Big time.
To some extent, huh?
So question I have is, when you were drinking, I know you said growing up, success, kind of alcohol, social drinking, things like that, but was there something that you were masking in your drinking? Was it just, what was it? What was the motivator?
That's valid. I've worked with my therapist over the past few years, and so there were several things actually. One of them, the main one, I didn't uncover until just a few months ago. But I worked through a lot of some trauma as a child. So my parents got divorced. I'm an only child from my father, who was an alcoholic, former drug addict, lifelong smoker. And so when it was time for him to come pick me up on the weekends, I lived with my stepdad and my mom, and who I call my mom and my dad, and my father. There was often times he wouldn't show up, and so I had a lot of like some abandonment, issues that had been fleshed out. I also dealt with a lot of just negative self, like just not really having the confidence, and really that led to a false sense of self, I'll say, right? So I showed like I was confident and outwardly, right, that I had it all and that this and that, but really it was a true sign, a true weakness, because that false sense of self brought out of me, a lot of defects of character were shown in forms of anger and in forms of, being very legalistic and mainly around those that are closest to me, my family. The last people that I'd want to affect that way were the people that I was affecting. Not that I want to affect anybody that way, but it's, I've got 2 little girls and my wife of 24 years. And, that's tough. That was a tough one with that, and then as I got into this cycle, shame, guilt, and then the moment I'd try, I felt like, okay, I'm getting out of it. God, this was the service for me, on Sunday, or this message was just for me. Okay, I'm gonna okay, I know I've got troubles. I'm gonna do this. This is it. And then boom, I would fall down on my face again and have that shame and guilt, and I'd be embarrassed to go back to God. Because I've done it over and over and over again.
Yeah. Wow.
So, but going back to your question, so following up on you, Pete, the back in 2020, I finally had the aha moment. It was actually 2 weeks before COVID. I was living in Orange County, California, and I felt, hey, I've got an issue. I need to stop drinking. And then COVID hit, got furloughed. We ended up, we're born and raised here in Kissimmee, Florida, and Central Florida here. And so we need to get back to family, and both my wife and I's family are all here. So we came back, that summer of COVID. Worked out nice because Florida was open. It's hard to remember those days, but and did a lot on my own. It was just literally just white knuckled it and said, I'm going to stop drinking. It was hard to, there was a lot of meetings that, I'd never attended an AA meeting. Celebrate Recovery out in California, I'd done a couple, but though they had stopped meeting, when we were out there because, everything was shut down, and at least in person, the virtual was still going. So then I got back here doing it on my own, boom, relapsed, and then that relapse lasted several months. My mom got in a fatal car accident, unfortunately. And so I actually was off and on, and that relapse was basically hidden from my wife and kids. Well, I thought it was hidden, right? Because vodka, nobody can smell that on your breath. So I hid that for a little over a year, and then finally the rubber hit the road, and then my wife and I had some fallout definitely in that time. I ended up at one point moving in with my in-laws that live here locally, so there was a separation. And then at the end of that, I ended up in rehab, and here locally. And I kind of did it for me. I kind of did it for my family, right? So coming out of rehab did really good. You're equipped. I felt very equipped, right? It's like, okay, this alcoholism is a disease. So here's some things you can do when you feel triggered and all these things. So I've got like this tool belt. But the problem is that I look back and now is that tool belt was for me, and it had nothing to do with God. And so I had all these tools and things to help me, from a worldly or from the tools that the world gives us, but not relying on our Heavenly Father to help me through.
Right. Like you said, white knuckling it and going through the steps. But even in Alcoholics Anonymous and maybe in Celebrate Recovery, don't they start with the first thing of sort of recognizing that there is a power greater than yourself, and that you can't do it?
Yeah, and yeah, that's right. In anything that we struggle with, our defects of character. Yeah, I mean, step one is just admitting you're powerless and my life's unmanageable. But step 2 and step 3, I thought that I had done, right? And in my head I had done. But, step 2, just earnestly know that God exists and he can restore me. But really step 3 is the key, make a decision to turn my will and power and control over to him. Step 3 is the key. I mean, well, 2 and 3, right? But for us, right, step 3 is just willfully turning that over to him, right? Because willingly turn it over to him, because I have been very willful. I'm a willful, want to do things on my own. I don't want to ask for help. That's kind of my. That's just how I'm wired. Maybe others are wired that way too.
I wonder, is that true? Is that true for all of us? I mean, the manhood story. Are we all willful?
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you have any advice for someone who might be listening, who might have the same problem in their life? Is it something that everyone kind of in the back of their head knows is a problem, or when it is, or is it something that they've lied to themselves until they have a moment of realization? And what would you point to as far as like warning signs or things to look at your own heart to see if it really is a problem in your life?
Yeah, those are really, really good questions. So I think if you have to question, like, do I have an anger problem? Do I have a alcohol problem? Do I have a issue with pride, or sexual addiction? Whatever the case may be. If you ever question yourself, or even that thought comes through my head, hey, I wonder. It's definitely something to dig into and pray about. For a number of years, I was running from God. I'll dive into that, but in a minute. But I kind of, when I look back now, that scene in Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers, where the king of Rohan is on the throne, and he's glazed over and he's hunched over, and the enemy kind of has this basically this mask over him, and of course Gandalf comes in with he hit his staff and he rebukes Saruman out of him, and man, that's when you're in that glaze and when you're in that moment, it's so hard to really know that's what's happening. I mean, almost what we talked about today.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of in your message. It's not a matter of just profession, because it's because we can do that in that state. I did that a lot. Yeah, God, you're my. But I wasn't possessing that power. Mm-hmm. That power. When I committed my life to Christ when I was 7 years old, that power of his resurrection, it was in me from day one. It's in all of us from day one when we give our lives to him, and it sits there untapped until you're ready to willfully turn your life over to him.
So you were running, and I think maybe I like that question that you asked, Zach, and just this idea that if you think you might have a problem, hey, do I have a problem in this area? It's certainly something to think about and pray about, and you probably do.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think too, looking at your story, you said it multiple times, right? You were in church, Like that message today, that this is the message, this is, man, I heard God speaking to me. You sense that. And so I think your story has to be one that resonates with guys that are sitting there in churches and they're not just trying to be hypocrites. They're just really in bondage.
Yeah.
And they don't they don't realize that, man, you really need to be set free, and so I feel like, there might be a guy out there that's hearing this and, you're going through that motion and you're Sunday after Sunday and you hear a message and you're like, man, I'm going to change. But man, you got to know that Christ really wants to set you free. I mean,
Right.
that's a reality. Yeah. So, which brings me to that question. So, what was that place where freedom really entered into your life? Like, I mean, you went, you have the church services, have the moments, you end up in rehab, right? Now you come out. So where does that freedom really happen?
Yeah, it was funny. So, a lot. I don't have a Christian therapist, right? So, but I've been working on all these different, things about my past and all this stuff. So back in, I was going through, some difficult times. Had a relapse even just in February, was my last my last drink. But I had realized that, hey, I'm there's a difference between sobriety and recovery.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing everything I could to be sober, just white knuckling it, but I wasn't doing anything to provide true change. I wasn't giving this my will over to God. I was being willful, and there was there's a lot going on. So I actually put myself into an intensive outpatient. So it's a 3 hours a day, 3 days a week. So. And I said, man, I need some help. But I realized though that step 2 and step 3 were the ones I'd missed or was missing. But so I still put myself and said, okay, I need a reset, worldly reset. God was with me, but I just needed. I knew I was going through and going to have some tough times. So my first week in there, that's when step 2 and step 3 hit me in this. Non-Christian, recovery room. And I was like, wow, and so I prayed and God just, all of a sudden I just felt like, oh my gosh, like that release, like God's got me. He's got my back. I literally just went to him. And I think that's a powerful message as well. Just in good times and in bad times, whether you're embarrassed or you're not embarrassed, especially as a man, God's got our back, and he wants to have our back. Mm-hmm. And we just have to go to him, even when it's embarrassing and you don't want to, you just go. So I went to him, and then a few weeks after that, I was like, well, God, hey, this is working pretty good in my, I feel it's working. God, you're really, my dog, was every single day, I'm in the Word, and I'm not going to use the term fake it till you make it. But I mean, I literally was like, hey, I need to make some changes here in this recovery. So, my the life I want is right on the other side of what I'm willing to do. Right. And that willing attitude, willful attitude is what holds me back. So I started giving, some of those moments back, or some of other areas of my life back. And so God started opening some doors, and was some aha moments. I started, tithing again. Hadn't tithed in a while. I was like, okay, God, like here you go. Like I shared with you a couple weeks ago, we gave out some books. I had this Open Doors book from Rick Warren, and I called up Saddleback and said, send me 100 books, and next thing you know, I'm in the book ministry. I mean, I have no idea what I'm doing, what caused me to reach out and buy these 100. But I'm literally like almost like, like glazed over. I have no idea what's going on. And so there was a Celebrate Recovery, like their big rally, 3-day rally. They do once a year out in Lake Forest campus, and but then they have it out. Well, we had one of those about 6 weeks ago, and it was telecast out, and it was a Saturday, and we were watching, and I missed the morning session, I had a lot going on, and it was only from like 12 to 3 so it was like 8 to 3, and I'd missed the whole morning. And before I would have easily have just texted the pastor and said, hey, I'm just not going to make it today. I tried, but I'll tell you, I pushed through, and I said, even though I'm going to make it for just a couple hours, I'm going to do what I said. I'm going to go out there. And I went in there and I watched the first 30 minutes, the speaker, and God had me. He really felt his conviction at that time. I had to run to the other room, and I literally was just on my hands and knees and just like cry. I mean, like bawling, not knowing really what was happening, right? And so it wasn't until a day or two after that, and God tapped me on the shoulder and he said, Dave, hey, you remember back in college, your sophomore year, at Lee University? This is what I mentioned coming back to. And he goes, you were there for a business major, and you're surrounded and all these different things. And he goes, but you remember when I called you into ministry? And that was something that I fought him with, and I buried it deep. My wife never knew that. Nobody ever. Until just in the last couple months when I shared it. It was buried deep. So going back to your question, now I look back at, yes, did I have some abandonment? Yes, did I have some things? But I was running from God, and that was the pain that was inside of me that I had hid and just wouldn't allow to resurface. And so that kept me all these years of being a good deeds-based Christian and not getting too close, being an arm-length relationship from God, which is not where you want to be. But because if I got too close and then I knew that would creep back up. And so, lukewarm Christianity became my norm for decades.
Wow. That sounds like what you've been preaching through recently, Bishop, right? In the book of
Jonah, yeah.
Book of Jonah.
You've been in the belly of the fish for a while.
Running from God.
Yeah.
So really, as we think about it, I guess if we all got honest with each other, there are times where we've all run from God. And that's a big deal for men, because it's hard for us to face those areas where we're really enslaved to sin or enslaved to some addiction. And Jesus wants us to be free. And so there probably are a bunch of guys out there listening to this who maybe, Dave, are in this place where you've been. You grew up in a Christian home. You went to a Bible college, for crying out. You followed Jesus, but it was kind of arm's length out there and not letting him in close. And what he wants is to take it real, to get us in, not just get baptized, not just make a profession of faith, but to allow his power to really transform us.
Yeah, and it sounds great. Like it sounds easy, right? It sounds like, okay, but you're stuck, and you're stuck, and you're stuck, and you're stuck, and what you're. Where you spend your time. I'll tell you, your message, Bishop, about 5 weeks ago, about worship, was another piece where it said, listen, the enemy loves if you share your worship with God. God just wants you to worship him and him alone, right? Everything else comes second. And when you share your worship, the enemy's all in.
Yeah.
Satan's like, yes, sir. Let's keep
He'll let you go
that.
to church. He'll let you go to church. He'll let you sing praises to Jesus, as long as you're also have other idols that you're worshiping.
And mine was golf. For years and years, for decades, it was golf. And occasionally I'd skip church on Sunday and I'd go golfing. So I was convicted during your service, or during that service with that, and I was like, wow, that has a stronghold, because where you choose to spend your time is what you're passionate about. And was I spending my time with God? I wasn't, the Bible has this, in the Old Testament, the first and best is what you gave to God, right, in the Old Testament. And then that theme, continues through. And when you think about that, was am I giving my first and best to God? I'm not. I think about the Foo Fighters song, Best of You. You guys know Foo Fighters? That song's been around.
I don't know that one.
No.
You don't know that one?
But I'm not musical.
But Dave Grohl said, he said he wrote that song, and the reason he wrote it was to breaking away from the things that confine you. And God wants the best of us, the best part of us, and so I start my day now, first thing in my devotional, before I even look at my phone or dive into work for the day or something, because I want to give him my best and try not to give him, my end of day when I'm, the weakest and things like that. So.
All right, so we got to wrap this up soon, but I want to just throw one more question out to you, David, and that is, you don't know where the future is, and is your wife going to forgive you? Are you going to move deeper into that relationship? Yeah. You don't know what's on the other side of this right now.
Yeah, I have no idea. So I'm in. We're separated right now, and it's a tough place to be. If I sit here in my natural mind and sit through and sift through and, hey, what's going on and what's happening, and it's a very difficult place to be. But God's got my back, and every single day I just rely on Him. And it's recent as a couple months ago, I never ever would have dreamt that this is where I'd be, but I'm as confident as ever that I'm on His plan A for my life, and I think that's a big one too. And I've shared this before. No matter where you are out there, half drunk, half this, or in living in sin, you're on God's plan A for your life, because He doesn't have a plan B. And the sooner you realize that. I remember hearing that message saying, I was in church, and I was actually took a few shots before church that morning, and I'm sitting there half drunk. My wife wouldn't sit next to me like a seater because she said I stunk, and I sat there and I said, God, how could I be on your plan A for my life? I look back now, and I think I know that God's given me my testimony to further His kingdom.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. Dave, I want to thank you for coming on the show and telling us your story. And I know it's going to help guys that are listening that are struggling with the same or similar things. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And I want to thank everyone at home for listening to this episode of the Forge Truth Podcast. If you have any questions or comments on what we talked about today, you can email us at the show at forgetruth.com. And if you want to learn more about the Forge movement, you can check out our website at forgetruth.com. Jason, do you want to leave a challenge for our men today?
Yeah. Sanctification, guys, becoming more like Jesus is an ongoing process. And none of us has ever arrived or will arrive until we arrive on the other side of our last breath. I just want to encourage you, allow the Lord to set you free. And don't be afraid to press in and let Him work whatever He needs to work out of you and work into you. Just find a group of guys that you can pray with, that you can be in God's Word with, that can challenge you to grow, and let the community of faith help you grow and walk in the freedom that God affords you.